All right. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ask ATG webinar presentation with the ATG MEP team. I am Don Rasmussen. I am the director of the services for MEP, for the MEP team at ATG, rather. And joining me today, I've got some of my members from the MEP team to answer any and all questions that you may have coming in. From at least on my screen here, I'm going to start on my left and move to my right. We have Joe Levia joining us today. Joe's experience is in electrical design, mainly low voltage. And if I screw up any of your experiences, please cut me off and tell the people I'm wrong. Phil Charlson. Phil Charlson comes to us from WD Partners. Phil spent some time in the reseller channel with US CAD and some others prior to his time at WD Partners. Phil's been doing this for a very long time, has a wealth of knowledge for everybody to leverage. Then we have our new guy after that, Stephen Belair. Stephen Belair comes to us from the construction side of things. He has a lot of project management experience and is a good person to leverage for any questions regarding project management and dealing with general construction. And then, of course, Mr. Barker is also here. Mr. Zach Barker is one of our main Team AUG individuals. So if you're ever leveraging us for design work, that is the man, the myth, the legend behind all the picks and clicks that produce the Revit models and the CAD models that you may ask us to produce for you. So that's a little bit of us guys in our team. And with that, everyone, we can open it up to questions. Please feel free to type in your questions to either the Q&A or the chat window. I'm watching both of them. And so I'll just kind of pause here for a moment, everyone, and wait for a few questions to go ahead and come in. In the event that they don't, we can just start a conversation around some topics. I think we got a small enough number of people here, guys, that we can definitely do the allow to talk here. So James KILBORN has raised his hand. I'm going to go ahead and click and allow James. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, Don.
Hey, James.
I'm wondering, I've got a engineer who wants to calculate the volume of a pipe network, and I know how to build a Revit schedule that'll provide that information, but my question is, when I start building a pipe network, do I need to have some kind of equipment with a connector at the start of the network, or could I simply just put a cap on one end of a run of pipe and then map out that that pipe as far as I need to, and then circle back and check my mount calculation?
Yeah, James, you should be able to do that. As long as the system is closed, you should be able to get volume calcs out of it, no problem.
Okay, thanks.
All right. One question down, guys. Wasn't all that hard. Well, I don't see a whole lot of other questions coming in, guys. And I do recognize some of the names on the attendees list, but I did make promises that I wasn't going to pick on anybody who was coming to the event today. Oh, we just had another hand raise here. Janice, go ahead and ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yep, yes. We got you now.
Okay,
yep.
okay. So can you address the difference between adding an electrical connection for mechanical equipment as opposed to circuiting the mechanical equipment directly?
Okay, so like in Revit, Revit, you want to place it in just going to try to clarify here, Janice, a little bit. So in Revit, you want to place an electrical connector that in essence you have control of versus circuiting something that's from somebody else's model. Was that kind of the workflow? Okay.
Right. I wondered, I mean, I've heard that's one of the best practices, but that was quite a while ago, and I don't know if that's changed. I continue to work that way, but I just wondered if other people are doing it differently.
Sure. In Janice, it really depends upon the level of control and where you want that to be. You know, in the event that you're getting a model from an outside consultant or a third party, and you don't get to dictate what information that model has in it,
Mhm.
then placing your own electrical connector gives you the control and gives you the ability to make sure that at least the consumption factors, for example, are correct, and it circuits properly.
Okay.
One of the biggest challenges from a mechanical standpoint is that when we do get electrical information for pieces of mechanical equipment, it's usually pretty rough electrical information, right? We might get FLA or
Mhm.
MOCP on a cut sheet. We won't get all the electrical information. And
Right.
so we're kind of limited there too. Part of what CTC has developed inside of that MEPPP pack is basically the NEC 430 motor load tables have been embedded into all of the mechanical equipment in that pack, so that mechanical designers can get that cut sheet with just the FLA or MOCP, enter that information, and it will auto-populate the rest of the electrical load for that
Mhm.
piece of equipment so that you could circuit it with confidence, Janice, in the event that you wanted to circuit their equipment.
Okay.
But for what you're doing right now, if you're getting a lot of third-party or outside consultant models, then yes, that's probably the best, safest workflow for you.
Okay.
But if you're, multidisciplinary firm, a lot of that's coming in-house. At a root level, we could correct what's going on at the mechanical side so that you could circuit the equipment directly and with confidence.
Okay. Are there any disadvantages to circuiting the equipment directly? Other than you said you wouldn't have as much control probably over.
Yeah, the big disadvantage would be that something changes and you're not notified.
Okay.
And all of a sudden what you've circuited is incorrect
Sure.
for the project. That would be the biggest question. Obviously, everything that we talk about from a BIM perspective, communication is probably the biggest part of that.
Mhm.
We want to make sure that we're sharing information now more than we ever really had before, prior to BIM.
Okay. So I might be working on a project for the first time that has an outside mechanical.
Okay.
And so when I link in his mechanical model, can I directly circuit once his model's been linked in, or?
Yeah, you would have to copy monitor across his equipment and then you should be able to circuit.
Okay.
Yep, because that would make that equipment live in your model.
Okay.
Some other things that you can do, Genesis, after you've copy monitored, you can also swap out for a different family in the same category. So for example, Janice, if you had, like, say, for example, a motor family that you've made, it's just simply a motor symbol with an electrical connector on it,
Mm-hmm.
but you've made that under the mechanical equipment category, you could copy monitor across a rooftop unit from the mechanical model, then inside of your model, once that's copy monitored across, swap that out for your motor family and then circuit that.
Okay.
And that would keep the advantages of copy monitor from an XYZ location perspective. So if it
Mm-hmm.
is moved, you'll get a notification that it's been moved.
Okay.
But other than that, it's going to act like your element in your project.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. Let's see if there's any more questions. Yes, we do have some more questions coming in. Justin has some questions. Justin, I will turn you on and go ahead and feel free to talk.
Can you hear me?
We got you now, sir. Yep.
Perfect. So this might be a loaded question for you, but we're going to see.
Oh, we like those.
So we've got the MEPPP pack, and we also have Train Trace 3D. We're trying to figure out how to most efficiently do HVAC load calculations between, Revit, MEPPP package, and Train Trace 3D. Any suggestions on what that workflow should look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, Justin, for the sake of time in this presentation, we wouldn't be able to get into all the details. But there is a class that was recorded at AU last year by John Atkinson and Blake Geither, who did a presentation on the GBXML workflow with the MEPPP rather, out to Train Trace and back. And that is recorded on the Autodesk website. That would be a great resource to look at when you're trying to master that. We also have some other recordings of classes that were taught around that GBXML workflow that I can definitely provide to you, Justin, so that you guys can understand that workflow and learn how to use it. Now, my understanding, at least the last time I talked to Train Trace, is that Train Trace 3D was not going to have that GBXML workflow inside of it. Have you gotten far enough on that, Justin, to verify that if Train Trace 3D is taking a GBXML and exporting it back out?
I know it takes it. I guess we
Okay.
haven't got far enough to know if it exports it back out or not.
Okay, good. Then that means my information is old and that they did put that in there.
Okay.
So that's a good thing, obviously. But I would search for those videos, Justin, and of course, if you want to poke me offline, or we can get together some way, shape, manner, or form, I can get you copies of those videos and some of that material so that you can look at that.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you very much.
No problem.
So Don, we have a chat question
Looks like something
from
came in here.
James.
Yeah.
ISVE will import and export data from or to Revit.
Yeah, James, I didn't know if that was a statement or a question. So I know James has played with heat loss, heat gain calcs and Revit too. I thought he might be just helping out Justin there. Okay, we got a question coming in here from an anonymous attendee. If changes are made to your templates, would you apply those changes to old or existing projects? If so, why? If not, why? And I think, guys, this is kind of a general question that maybe all of us can chime in on. Joe, why don't you go ahead with your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, definitely. So I've actually had this issue come up in industry on multiple occasions, both on the design side and on the VDC side. Depending on the project that you're working on, depending on kind of what you've got set up, if it's say more like a project you've worked on within say the last year or so, on occasion, if you definitely see yourself going back in, say you're in the addendum phase or you're in the CB phase or something like that, and you make those updates, I've gone back in and updated that existing project with some of those latest and greatest, especially if you have like a new view template, or you go in there and you update some families and stuff like that. Definitely, if it's something that you're going to be pushing back out to the field, or you're going to be pushing out for additional information to an architect firm or something along those lines, that's when I go back in there. It's only when I have to add that additional value on projects that may not necessarily be active, but may be running, and we're producing something at a high level back to people. Now, outside of projects that are still in the addendum or CD phase or CB phase, I don't go back in and add any of that information into those previous projects. So just because what I was accustomed to, I mean, we're moving so fast, it's hard to get back into some of those old projects, and that really turns into, if we're putting out fires at this point, getting into an old project is quite hard to get back into. So,
On
Sure, Joe,
another
go ahead,
note,
Phil. Yep.
You know, I've obviously experienced this as well a number of times. And if you do decide to push some of those updates into your older projects, and you're using the transfer project standards tool within Revit, don't have everything selected and push all that in. Do, you know, one thing at a time and check what is transferring in it. Obviously, if you know, you're updating textiles, maybe it's a Revit 2017 project where we had a lot of text issues there. If you're updating those, that could relate into a lot of modifications that you have to go back into and modify for text. So be careful with that, and do, you know, individual items, and don't just dump everything all in at one time.
Yeah, Revit 2017 comes to mind there, Phil. For me, guys, with that question about, you know, do I go back and apply those changes to old projects? In my opinion, guys, for me, it's all about value. If it's an old project that's done and wrapped up, then absolutely not. I'm not going to spend any time doing that. But if it's an existing project that's still currently moving and it's an older template that I got started with, then I just always ask myself, you know, is what I'm going to add to that project from my new template going to provide me a value where that project currently sits? If the functionality that I've added to the template is all about project setup, that project's already set up, then it doesn't provide me a ton of value where that project currently sits. So I just always ask myself that value question about what I'm going to add back. And then of course, what Phil said is make sure you're doing it one at a time. That's some pretty great advice. Yeah, don't just dump everything in there. That can cause some headaches. Okay. Steve, Zach, or the Zachs rather, any comments on the template questions?
I think y'all hit it pretty much nail on the head.
Yeah, I honestly, I'm at most agreements with Phil, especially taking it, you know, starting with one, because honestly, you can run into more errors just by doing it all at once and walking away instead of going through step by step and seeing, because there's always those little changes that we don't notice or see that can really affect the drawing.
Yeah,
Sure.
you can wind up with a whole bunch of components and stuff that has the one in parentheses, which is just muddies things up.
Oh, absolutely. So we have another question in here about condensed electrical equipment schedules. Question is, after I've adjusted the columns, I want to see and then realize there is another column I want to display. Is there a way to turn on columns without unhiding all columns? Oh, okay. I think I understand what you're asking here now. You've hidden some columns inside a Revit schedule, and now you want to unhide individual columns and not unhide all. To my knowledge, there's only the unhide all button, but I could be wrong. I'd like to open up that to the rest of the team.
Actually done. I've got Revit open right now. So when you're in a schedule and you go to the schedule properties, you can go to formatting and just simply select on the field that you want to unhide, and they'll just set it as a hidden field as an option within there. So, that would just be that one column then.
So it's inside that field dialog box, and then we can, that's right. Yep. I knew that. Shoot.
So formatting.
Sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, formatting, hidden field or not, you can uncheck that one.
Yep, I forgot about that single. Yep.
Yeah, and for anybody that has the MEP productivity pack, you should all know about the hidden field there, because there's a lot of hidden fields for
lots of fields
parameters to turn on,
unhide.
turn off. Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Absolutely. So hopefully that answers your question. Able to get in there. Alrighty. Well, that would be the last question that we see in the chat right now. If anybody else has got some more questions, go ahead and raise their hand, or go ahead and type questions into the chat. I did have a question around kind of some remote working capabilities, guys. We're all getting kind of pushed into BIM 360 and remote working and things like that. And had a question for Phil on the call. Phil, when you're getting into BIM 360, you're thinking about starting to maybe even have to go down that road to leverage that software, buy that software. What are some of the things to really kind of keep in mind when you're exploring BIM 360 as an option?
Oh, well, for BIM 360, just a little, I guess, overview. I have been using BIM 360 for the past couple of years here, and you know, when you pop into BIM 360, a lot of people think of it as more of just a Revit cloud hub, but I try to obviously push to customers to advance that a little bit more, because with BIM 360, you can use it more as a project hub that you might typically have on your local server. Obviously, with more people working from home, VPNs getting overloaded with everybody trying to connect and get to certain files, BIM 360 has been a true source of being able to utilize that service at home, to be able to access different types of files. I couldn't tell you how many different types of files you can actually put into BIM 360, but you can go in and create your folder structures within BIM 360, same as what you would typically have within the server. You can go in and select who has access to certain aspects of it. That might be something that you would have to expect an IT person to be able to go in and change if it was on a server, if you didn't want to have people getting into that. But in BIM 360, you're looking at it more of from a project manager look, and that project manager can decide who has access to certain locations while it's in the cloud, and also being able to allow outside resources access to it as well. So it doesn't have to just be an internal folder structure. It can be set up so that external people on the project can also see information that they need on those projects.
Great. Thanks, Phil.
Yep.
We actually got another question coming in. So another raised hand here from Christian. Christian, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak here, and go ahead and feel free to ask your question.
Hey guys, can you hear me just fine?
Yep. Yes, sir.
All right, perfect. So here's one shameless plug for MEP3 and for the CTC project tools. My question is have you guys done anything with the saved settings so that like all the MEP3 schedules are saved outside, so that you don't have to wait for it to all load going through the schedules and stuff like that? Or is that something that each company is individually responsible for?
I assume, Christian, that you're talking about the original starter project and everything loaded in there and opening that up from the beginning.
Yep, and I'm actually talking about the spreadsheet link. Sorry, I think I forgot to mention that.
Oh, the spreadsheet link information that's inside of there. Yes, that is something that we're kind of is packaged rather that way from CTC.
Yep.
We put it all together, or should say rather CTC. Sorry guys, I used to work for CTC. I still use the we nomenclature as pertains to that product very often. The way that is packaged is on purpose, Christian. We wanted to give all the clients the ability to be able to create, kind of customize their own environment, if you will. Mm-hmm. So we ship that all together, and then you can go ahead and break that apart to create your custom environment. We found that a little bit easier than to add, the theory behind the pack, and a lot of what's in the pack is always that it's easier to erase what you don't need than it is to add what you do. And so that theory is just carried out through the packaging.
Okay.
But CTC is always up for recommendations and suggestions, Christian. So that you're not the first one to have that recommendation or suggestion, and that's something that I know that I've had conversations with them with, and we're taking a deeper look at.
Okay.
Don, it looks like we have one coming in from Justin.
We do have one, yep, coming in from Justin. Sorry, guys. Sorry, Justin, I was looking at the written stuff. I will go ahead and unmute you, sir.
Okay, hello again. Could you guys discuss any Dynamo workflows that exist and work well with the MEP3 package, other than the one that's shipped with?
Yeah, there's a couple that are shipped with it, Justin. When it comes to Dynamo routines, I don't know of any pre-canned Dynamo routines that are out there currently that work with the MEPPP. And our team Dynamo expert had some scheduling conflicts and wasn't able to make this call today. However, Justin, I do know who writes most of the Dynamo routines for the MEPPP and who they work for. They are an engineer by trade, and they work mainly on the mechanical side of the pack, but they are constantly developing dynamo routines for the pack that they leverage internally. I could definitely hook you up with that individual, Justin, and he would, I bet you'd be more than willing to share what he's been up to and have a deeper conversation with you from what he's been experiencing with dynamo in that pack.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thank
Yeah,
you.
no problem. And Justin, just so you know, my email address is the first letter of my first name and then my last name at atgusa.com.
Sounds
So
great.
if you want to
I'll
reach out
shoot
to
you a
me
message with
afterwards,
these couple things. Yeah,
that'd be great, Justin. Thank you.
thank you.
All right,
Ah,
we got a fabrication question.
yes, fab question. Since I'm the, I think the only one on the call here, guys, that's actually run fab.
Nope, I actually have to.
Have you, Phil? Okay.
Yep,
Okay. Yep. So what do you recommend for spooling and prefab?
CAD MEP.
So yeah, Mark, I see your question there, and obviously there's the fabrication offering from Autodesk, right? That would be Fabrication CAD MEP, MEP, and CamDuct. Inside of all that is spooling takeoffs for the fabricatable parts and pieces and the layout capabilities of FabCAD MEP. You can also do this out of Revit with assemblies, is what it's called. It's a feature inside of Revit when you're using fab parts and pieces. There's assembly sheets that you can put together. However, that's not really an automated process unless you have a third-party tool. There are a couple third-party tools out there that do that out of Revit, but it really boils down to what you're leveraging, be it Revit and or FabCAD MEP. Now, it's important to understand, everyone, that fabrication in Revit is not an isolated product. And by that, I mean fabrication in Revit actually reads the fabrication database from FabCAD MEP. So you can't just have Revit and do fab, and you can't just have fab and do fab and Revit. You really do need to have both offerings because the library of parts and pieces is what is read in both environments. So one library, Revit, and fab environment, and MEP and CamDuct. So that's the big advantage, guys, is that it's one library for estimation, design, fabrication, installation.
And I haven't taken a look at CAD MEP as far as their library is concerned, but I kind of thought it has been a little bit light, so there is some added items that probably need to be customized in the CAD MEP to make it a little bit more complete.
Yep, most time that you're doing a fabrication implementation, you are going down that rabbit hole of some content creation. There's also Autodesk's website, building3dcontent.com, that houses a lot of the ITM content, ITM being item content that you find inside of Fab. That's the content file extension is ITM. So Mark, I hope that answers your question. If not, go ahead and type in there and let us know it didn't, and we can further that discussion. We have another question coming in. Do we have any recommendations on renovation projects to monitor what existing conditions are and how they're put in and how accurate they are? As an example, if an existing pipe is put in at 10 feet, any recommendation on how to track if that is a placeholder elevation or a field verified elevation? Ooh, that is a really good question. I'm assuming that you've run into this as a challenge, and that's why you're asking the question. Point cloud scanning is probably the easiest way to have this verified, because you're going out there, you're going to scan the existing conditions, you're going to bring that point cloud into Revit, and then you should be able to see very quickly if that pipe that's modeled in Revit is in the field location or in a made up location. Outside of a point cloud model, I'm really racking my brain as to how we could track some of that. Just kind of thinking out loud and thinking through the process, you would have to, obviously get a model from somebody who claims that that is a field accurate model. then what I think that I might do if that is delivered to me, just kind of thinking through the process again, you know, I might copy monitor some things that are really important to me. That way, if I get updates to that model and things move, I know right away that those things have been moved. There's also dimensional constraints or alignment constraints that I might be able to leverage there. Putting constraints on items inside of Revit. Obviously, if those items start moving, those constraints break and I get notifications. But those are the only two ways that I can think of tracking that outside of, well, maybe you could leverage phasing inside of Revit to track that too creatively. Anybody else got any ideas on this one?
I was thinking maybe add some kind of specific parameter, or maybe even something just in a comment field regarding it being a renovated existing condition item, and then adding some kind of a filter applied to that comment to look for that information for maybe an existing, so that we could tell the difference between what was the field measured and what was designed. I also think obviously we could go in and change the color representation so I'd be able to see it a little bit better between the two differences there.
Filters would be a good combo. Go ahead, Steve.
There are some other solutions out there for point clouds specifically to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish there, and where basically you extract your piping from the point cloud. You can then go and basically you can color code it versus, like, you can color code it based on overlap, percent overlap, and then percent within tolerance. And then bringing that into Revit, you can check, well, before you go into Revit, you can literally QC every single pipe and fitting and approve it, reject it as to whether it's accurately represented. And then you would do that QC process and then bring those into Revit, and you would have your final product there. So the work would be done outside of Revit, but once that work or that process was complete, it would be brought into Revit, and you would have your complete as-built from that.
Mark is unmuted.
How about now?
Now we got you.
There we go.
That's weird. So we're a plumbing outfit, and I guess I'm wondering about, like, your template cleanup. So we just have the one template, and we have a lot of views and whatnot, so obviously we can't run any purges. I guess what's recommended or what's normal to clean that up?
To clean up, like, for example, Mark, I assume you're talking about a Revit template?
Yeah.
Okay. You can still use purge, because all purge will do is take any family basically that's not placed in the project and remove it from the project. So purge won't strip your views or anything like that, but it would strip a bunch of your family content that wasn't already placed someplace in the project. Purge is a big tool that's used for that. I've got a couple questions that I usually ask myself when I'm going down my template list and cleaning things out, and it's very similar to, like, if I could use this example, Mr. Barker can maybe relate to this, since he just got a new house and he's going to be moving. I always equate this to me moving. When I move from a house to another house, as I'm packing, I usually look at my items and say to myself, have I thought about this, moved this, touched this in the last 365 days? If the answer is no, I'm not packing it, it's not coming with me. If the answer is yes, I'm packing it and it's coming with me. And I kind of take that same mentality to my templates when I'm going through and I'm cleaning them up. If I haven't leveraged parts and pieces in there in a very long time, over a year, and then, you know, depending upon the project types you do, maybe 2 years, then I got to really ask myself a serious question of whether or not it's providing value inside of that template for me or for my team, for that matter. when you go to clean it up, obviously purge is the main tool that people use. Some other methodologies that have been used is, a clean Revit environment, if you will, and bringing in parts and pieces to that of the things that you know that you want to create a nice clean environment. Mark, if I could ask a follow-up question, is this template something that you've been building and it's just kind of grown out of control, or is this something that was kind of inherited and it's just kind of, now we've got some more knowledge in Revit and we want to go clean it up and dial it in?
Yeah, so it's about 5 years ago I started, and I built it as I learned Revit. So you can imagine. But I don't know that it's out of control. But there's definitely a lot in there, and maybe I know I did do a purge once and it wiped my families, and I do like to keep families in there. I guess.
Are you experiencing some performance issues, Mark, because of file size on the template, you feel?
No, not necessarily. I guess it's more of a housekeeping, just kind of hey, it seems like something I should do.
Yeah, on an annual basis, we should definitely be taking a look at our templates and making sure that they're current with things that we've done, basically. Mark, it sounds like you started this when you started Revit, and then as you learned more knowledge of Revit, you grew the template, and that's obviously an awesome way to do it. There's always the theory of leapfrogging templates project to project to ultimately build the best template over time. The drawback to some of that, and of course doing it the way you've done it as you're learning, is that you make some mistakes or do some things that you learn later where I could have maybe done that this way, or that could have been a little bit better. If you're the one who's tasked with that, I've always kept a list of kind of some things that I think that I should add or maybe go back and revisit as my knowledge grows. Guys, feel free to comment if you've got any other tips for Mark going back cleaning up Revit templates.
Well, one thing that I'm kind of wondering, since it's a 5-year-old template, have you just been upgrading it each year to the next release? Because typically, what I might suggest is, starting out with a fresh template from that year's release, and starting to maybe pull in some of the settings that you had from that previous one, just so that you have a more up-to-date current Revit file than just continually moving it forward each year.
Okay, yeah, so it was a 2016 to start. And then there's definitely some messy parameters and whatnot in there. As I learned parameters, I was creating things. But we do keep a running just notepad. So anything we need added, we keep on there. And then before any one of us starts a project, we'll go loop those into the template. So if I'm going to rebuild it, let's say rebuild a 2021 template, do you start, I guess, what do you base it off of? If I'm a plumbing shop, should I start with plumbing? There's probably a bunch of extra stuff in there that I don't really need.
You can go a couple directions with that. I think there's a default one as well. Sometimes
systems default template.
Yeah, there's systems default and has a lot of stuff in it already. If you were to take one of those out of the box templates, I would almost purge out completely what's in there and then bring in your content so that you don't have that extra junk that is with the out of the box templates. Obviously, you're going to get a lot of system families that you take a look at and it's like, I don't need that, but they have to be in there just because in order to add more system families, you have to take an existing one that's already in the project, duplicate it, and move on from there. So, I mean, you're going to see some wall types within there, obviously duct, pipe, probably some electrical stuff in there as well. But it's stuff that has to be in there, but at least you'd be starting kind of with a fresh slate and adding stuff that you had from the 2016 version of your Revit template. That way you know you're getting newer type functionality, and it should be working with the content that you're using within there.
Okay, thank you.
Nope, no problem, Mark.
And I would typically recommend to do that maybe every 3 years on a template. So.
Okay.
And we got another question coming in here from Casey asking about how do we feel about building a new template from scratch versus upgrading? How often would you recommend starting from scratch? I'll let other guys answer, but I'll just say, Casey, I hate repeating work. I absolutely hate repeating work if I don't have to, and that's my 2 cents on the matter. But I will let the rest of the team chime in.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. So when it comes to rebuilding a template from scratch versus upgrading, I've come from some different backgrounds where depending on your project work, depending on what type of disciplines you're doing, I've come from firms where we were a full MEP firm, and then we also had low voltage, and I ran the low voltage department basically when it came to power user and everything with templates. And we did a lot of projects around the Midwest just on our own, with no other discipline in our firm contracted. So the way I handled that, we would put together an actual template dedicated towards the whole firm for some of those projects that are more reasonable, that don't get necessarily too big, and we can have MEP all in one template. But then we also had individual projects or individual disciplines separated off for some of those high rises or very large projects we did. And then I had my own individual low voltage template as well. And I like to set it up to where kind of as we progress, we create a new template and we archive an existing template. On average, every two model years is what I did. And I tried to bring over as much as possible. But also, as Phil was talking about previously, when it comes to new functionality and Revit and everything like that, especially, 2016, 2017, 2015 Revit, those are some interesting years per se. So once 2018, 2019 and stuff like that came along, and where we're at right now with 2021, there's quite a bit of new functionality, especially now that we can start moving things over like some of our legends and stuff like that. So I like to have a good template every 2 years, and then I like to complement good templates with good container models that are cleaned up and a sandbox model and stuff like that, in order just to make sure if I'm doing something new out of the ordinary, I can do it in a sandbox model, and I can either move that information into a container model to move over a later time, or I can drop that directly into my template.
Oh, thanks, Joe.
Yeah, no problem.
Go ahead, Mr. Rico.
Yeah, I would kind of like to add on to that is from where I have been in a lot of different places and seen a lot of things. It's a lot easier to start from scratch once and work your way from there. And the reason being for that is because with the constant starting from scratch of that repetitiveness or every so often, it will lead to a lot of taking time away from not only the project or from any of your employees that you're trying to help out, especially with all of this. You typically want to keep it done once and just tweak it every so often and kind of go from there and build from there.
Sure. I'm actually quite interested to hear Mr. Barker's opinion on some of this because being in the TMOG side of things, he has had to do multiple types of projects on multiple templates, multiple different points of completion, all sorts of things. So Mr. Barker, do you have an opinion on templates and starting from scratch and upgrading and those sorts of things?
I think it's best to, just keep adding to what you have and just keep rolling it forward as much as possible until it does grow out of control. And then, if file size is starting to be an issue, then start looking at starting with a clean slate and bringing in the stuff that you want to go forward with and go from there.
No, thank you, sir. All right, well, Casey, I hope that answers your question. At least according to the chat, it kind of looks like it did. So anybody else with any other questions, go ahead and feel free to raise your hand or type them into the chat.
Mark does have his hand
I
raised.
said, does Mark have another question or is that still there from the last time? Oh, it went away. So it must have been the one from last time.
So I will recommend or ask everybody, to when they're looking to migrate to that next release, go out on YouTube, check out the new features for Revit. Obviously, when that new release comes out, you'll see videos that same day. It used to be that we used to do road shows to show off new features for each release, but obviously that's gone to the wayside now, just because everybody pops onto YouTube, watch a 5-minute video, back to work again. Obviously, we can't all take a few hours off of work and go out, especially these days. We can't go out and mingle with a number of people in meetings anymore.
I do miss driving all around the region for a week though, Phil. I miss the tours of the new features, because those were actually some fun tours. We got to do some presentations and meet lots of people, and those were good times.
I think you probably like the food choices too.
Yeah. No,
Try out some foods, different areas.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun doing those. And Phil's absolutely right. Obviously, if you're going to be upgrading and looking at using a new version of Revit, and of course, we're all kind of stuck doing this because Revit's not backwards compatible, right? We always have to move forward. It's always a good idea to look at what the new features are and ask yourself, why am I doing the upgrade? Obviously, for us in MEP, sometimes we don't get to control the why we're doing the upgrade. Sometimes it's dictated to us, and we just got to deal with it. But it's always a good idea to think about, why you're upgrading. It's also a good idea to, in my opinion, wait a little bit. Don't do it the day it comes out. Don't do the upgrade, because what you'll see over the first week or two of the new version being out is, as people are doing upgrades, if you go out to forums and you go out to knowledge networks and you start doing some research on maybe some of the pitfalls of this upgrade, that's when you stumble onto things like what happened to us in 2017 with the text editor changes. You'll start to hear people say that they're running into these issues, which of course prepares you more for when you have to do this. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying just you don't necessarily have to do it right that second, right away. There may be some pitfalls that people are unaware of at the moment. Another thing that a lot of the clients I speak with do is they either upgrade on an odd year or an even year. They don't upgrade every year unless they have specific projects that make them, basically. So upgrading is great, guys. I'm not trying to talk you out of upgrading. Let's just upgrade with some forethought and really think about what it is we're trying to accomplish when we do that. Let's just not do that blind and say, just because we got it, let's do it. There's a lot of things that can be awesome, and there's a lot of things that can break.
Yeah, on average, whenever it came to upgrading and everything along those lines, the general rule of thumb that I followed in the industry is once there's a release, and that's going to be the year we determine we're going to upgrade to, we wait till the next quarter in order for us to actually start going in and making our upgrade and getting some of our changes, just so that way all the bugs and stuff like that can get worked out of that version.
I don't think we've received the 2021 update yet. I would assume probably be in next month or so that we'll get the update for that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just I guess a heads up here, if people are moving to 2020, 21, one of the new features is being able to import a PDF. They added that in the 2020 version. And 2021, they added the option to link in a PDF. So kind of maybe a top newer feature within Revit to be able to bring in that PDF file that you have.
Has anyone tried that yet?
Yes, I have.
Pretty good.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually using it for my webinar. Next one.
Oh, shameless plug, Phil. Tell people when your webinar is.
I don't know when my next webinar is,
Now I'm putting you on the spot.
but it is going to be on family creation. So if you want to know more about family creation, we're starting out with some basics. It's going to be a 3-parter, and it's going to be Star Wars based. So making it a little interesting.
Yep, breaking up the monotony of the day. Let's have some fun.
Yes.
Well, alrighty, everyone. I don't see any other questions coming in with a couple minutes left here. Obviously, want to be respectful of everybody's time. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending. Really do appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us, and hopefully we answered your questions really well. Any more questions or anything that anybody has, obviously feel free to reach out to us at any time you have questions. There's a couple other people who weren't able to join us today who are also members of the MEP team, Bruce Johnson and J.A. Alla, who you may or may not know. But guys, there's a wealth of knowledge here. One of the biggest things I'm proud of this MEP team here is if you put us all together, there's over 50 years of combined design experience in the MEP realm with this team. And that's something that we're pretty proud of. And that's something that we feel makes us pretty unique as compared to a lot of other resellers. We've actually been there, done that. Same shoes you're currently sitting in. So obviously feel free to ask us any questions or anything that may come up in the future. And also thank you guys for all the panelists. Thanks for showing up and sacrificing an hour out of your day. Come spend a little time with me answering some questions. I appreciate it, guys.
All right.
No
Thank
problem.
you.
All righty. Well, thanks everyone for attending, and hopefully we'll be seeing you in the future.